Hey guys, welcome back. I'm your host, Ruben Gomez. Welcome to the Seasonal Movement Podcast. Today we had a great guest, Barry Walton. He's an Emmy Award winner, producer, and author whose career spans documentary, commercial, and narrative storytelling. I have so much to learn. I'm so excited. I hope that you guys are excited too, as he is the founder of Endless Media. And Barry has worked with top brands, sport franchises, major networks, including Fox Sports, NatGeo, Animal Planet, crafting stories that inspire, inform, and captivate. Oh my gosh, I want to learn so much from Barry right now. His work has earned numerous accolades, including the prestigious Golden Matrix Award and 18 Best Documentary Short Awards for Emmy America, a visual haunting exploration of the United States during COVID-19 pandemic. As an author, Barry published The Unknown Adventure, a story of dreaming big. I love that. I watch it. Living boldly and learning from failure. A deeply personal memoir that chronicles his extraordinary journey through love, risk, and self discovery. I think we all go through that. And how many of us wish that we can document that, right? The journey of life. He's currently working on Empty America, his second book, which offers an in depth reflection on his journey across a nation in crisis and raises profound questions about America's identity, purpose, and future. I can't wait to read it. I think it's a very interesting subject that we all live through it. So help me guess Barry. Hi, Barry. How are you?
Hey, Ruben. It's great to be here, man. Thanks so much. That was an incredible intro. Lots of good stuff there.
I know. I wish I can talk to that guy. I have so many questions for him.
I wish I knew where he was too, man. It sounds I don't know that guy as well. No, I'm joking. No, there's a lot of good stuff in there when it's all condensed,
Yeah.
into a couple sentences, but it's spread out over years and years, so.
How long does these accolades, span from? Like, how? When did you start doing this work? How was the beginning of that inspiration and working into this industry?
I started in 1999. I moved out to Los Angeles, Hollywood, to kind of take a shot and kind of get my, like so many kids do, take a shot at being famous. I had worked towards an agent. I had an agent, but I kind of started doing more of the production side, more of the behind the scenes side of the work, doing a PA work, which is a production assistant, running around sets. And I had a few lucky breaks right out the bat where I was working on the sets with Will Smith and Jennifer Lopez and Jennifer Love Hewitt, and I remember literally I had a friend in Minnesota, because in Minnesota I went to college in Minneapolis. I did some stuff in acting and in different pieces there. That's kind of I actually helped work on and was an extra in the film A Simple Plan by with Billy Bob Thornton and Bill Paxton, and it was directed by Sam Raimi, and they filmed that up in Minnesota, the cold winter, and that was my first experience with film, and I fell in love with it. So the girl who had helped me kind of get those roles, she moved to LA. So when I went out to LA, I called her up, and she got me on. I had literally been in Los Angeles for maybe 3 days, and I was working on a music video with Busta Rhymes. I don't know if you remember Busta Rhymes. He was. Sorry about that. That was my computer. He was a rapper, a famous rapper in the 90s, 2000, early 2000s. Still kind of known, but not as well. And I remember that was my first break. And I saw a guy rolling a can. Wow, hold on. Let me turn my notices off here. My computer is
Yeah,
making
don't
all these
worry. I
noises.
mean, we have a privilege to be able to be talking right now, and I understand 100%.
Yeah, no, and so it's telling me that I have our podcast. That's what it's
I
telling me
know.
right now.
Yeah, a reminder.
And I just I'm trying to prevent it from doing it anymore. But so the point is I had been in Hollywood for like 3 days. I kind of got my first break. I was doing a music video with Busta Rhymes, and the guy was rolling a camera off of. I'll just never forget it because this guy was rolling a dolly off of one of the Cube trucks. Cube truck is a nickname for like a U-Haul or whatever that they use in the industry. And I was telling him my story, and he's like, "You sound like you have a true Hollywood story," you know. And
Yeah.
I just broke into the industry overnight. You know, it was and it was a great start. And I thought, you know, and I had high hopes. You know, I thought I was going to make it big, and I did really good. And I probably could have done a lot more. There were a variety of things that kind of changed my direction and influenced me, but I had a couple of amazing years, and that was my start. That was my foundation. I did that for about 5 years, traveled around. I got to go down to South America and shoot commercials. I got to travel out to Tennessee and shoot commercials and do different things. And so I was a little bit of kind of had a great window, and that was my start. And I can go on more and more experience, but that was where it all began.
So I have a few highlights there that I want to highlight, which everyone can say, oh well, that girl, like, you know, the connection is huge. But even before that, there's also the talent. Like, I don't think that you will have gotten any opportunity if you didn't have the talent. Sure, you got the connection, but even before that, what it stands to me is that you just took the decision and you went for it. And when you were there, you called the lady. You didn't call her before leaving and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. It's like you just did it. And then that's when you call it. And I think that's a testament to being determined to follow our dreams and to get it done. Then, of course, the talent, the connection, it all helps. And I don't need to be Busta Rhymes to see that clearly. Like, wow, like it's kind of like the 90s famous or the 90s dream going to Hollywood. I think that it's not a dream anymore, but now with social media, it kind of gets blent a little more in between the lines, and a lot of people can find that success in different ways. But in the 90s, that was like the dream.
No, it's actually really true. That's a really good observation. In the night, it isn't. It isn't. I have some guys. I knew a young guy who worked with me for a couple years, about 3 or 4 years back, and he moved out to L.A. He went to kind of chase his dream. But it isn't what it was. It isn't what it was only because the industry has kind of dispersed a little bit. It's
Yeah,
moved.
decentralized.
Thank you. It's decentralized throughout the country. But when that was the era, like if you want anyone who was anyone was in LA and that's where everything was. It was still very centralized. And the budgets were still really big. And to your point, literally I packed I had $2,000 to my name, and I got in my car. I didn't know anybody, and I drove across the country and I started calling people. It's not completely true. I had flown out first and scouted, but when I moved out, I was just
It's
calling
a
the people I
measure
met.
risk. It's not
Oh yeah.
just like a crazy decision, like you analyze it and took the shot.
Yeah, I went out, I scouted for 10 days. That's when I got the Busta Rhymes shoot. And when I was on that shoot, I collected everybody's number and I just started calling people while I was driving around the country. And this was before the cell phone. So I was like stopping at friends' house that I knew along the way and then calling them, or I would call them from my home and tell them I'm coming. So it was not the same with the cell phone. The cell phone was literally in its infancy. I specifically even remember buying my first cell phone in LA. And so, yeah, I just made the connections. I went out there. I took a risk, and it worked out. It just came together. It was an amazing experience.
I see myself in the story because I had about $2,000 as well, but this was back in 2010, so I probably had a lot less money, and I traveled a lot farther. I traveled from Venezuela to, out of all places, Iowa, to go play baseball, go to school, and I can feel that. I know it's very different. The times, like,
Field of Dreams.
yeah, build a dream. Yeah,
No,
build a dream.
the movie Field of
Oh,
Dreams.
yeah.
The
Not
baseball.
quite.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
No,
quite that small little town, but basically Omaha, Nebraska.
yeah.
But you know, who travels to the Midwest for vacation? And I never really been in the Midwest. I've been in LA, I've been in Florida, I've been in many places, the East Coast, but not the Midwest. So it was kind of foreign to me. And now I can appreciate anybody that does that. Now, what I see in your story too is the connection you have with Minnesota. So I wanna highlight that because when we're talking about seasons now, you move into LA, the environment is very different, of course, from a social dynamic perspective. But I do know you have experiences with the seasons and so on, and I want to highlight that, like how beneficial was, to face different winters and so on for your energy, your mood, and of course, life is more exciting. Like there's a social dynamic and vibrancy to LA. How the environment really shifted you and changed you as you were going through that.
Well, I grew up in Michigan, so I grew up in cold weather, but Minnesota is another level of cold. It gets very cold in Minnesota, up in Minneapolis. We had one winter where it was 20 days. They broke a record where they were 20 days below zero, and 5 of those days were 20 below zero. It was freezing cold. They canceled everything. And when I did my shoot with the Sam Raimi and I did that production, that was a winter shoot, and I was freezing, man. I was out on the ice. I was out on the ice because we were out in a park and they were shooting in a park. If you ever watch the movie, there's a plane that crashes and there's a drug deal that went wrong, and these people discover money. And in the closing scenes, they have a police group that comes down and combs the area. And I was in that closing scene, and it was freezing cold. It was in the evening, and I had they had put me in a full police officer uniform, and I was freezing. My feet were freezing. It was cold as heck. So when I moved to LA and I got to that warmer weather, speaking of the seasons, I fell in love. I live in Florida now. I unfortunately don't think I can live in cold weather anymore. I tried. I lived in Michigan for 8 years. I can't do the cold weather. I get depressed. Even right now in Florida, it got down to like 38 right now. It got really
Hmm.
cold just literally last night and the last 2 nights. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I'm sitting in here. I got a little fireplace over here in the corner, and I'm just sitting in my office with the fireplace on and blasting the heat because because I get so kind of, it sucks the energy out of me. I
Yeah,
don't want to do anything when that cold hits. I just kind of get buckled up. So the seasons do, impact a lot of things. And I know you're doing some research on that. I know you mentioned your book that you're working on, and it's funny. I mean, there's so many layers to that, but the seasons impact creativity for sure.
I
They
agree.
impact, you're kind of like, oh, I don't want to do anything. So, yeah, so I kind of experienced all of that. But when I moved out to California, and you could be outside all the time, year around, I thought to myself, this is the land of milk and honey. This is paradise. Like, why would I go anywhere else? I did end up going elsewhere, but and there's many days that I ask myself why, but that's kind of a little bit of, that's another story.
I want to highlight that even though you are from Michigan, even though you have experienced cold weather in Minneapolis, there's this thing that I kind of study and thought about it a lot, and is that perhaps you're in Michigan and your skin is kind of like a crocodile, a gator, like gator skin, very thick. It's like you're wearing a shell, it's protective. So perhaps you go into the zeros and you can somehow handle it because you're used to that. But I notice so many people with the same story. When you get away from that for a few years, it's like your skin shrinks, right? And you are more susceptible to that weather change. It's not just temperature as well. I have known a lot of people that suffer from seasonal affective disorder that live in Florida, and they experience it. And when you see their stories and how they express, it's not different than somebody in Michigan that had been experiencing a cloudy day for 2 weeks in a row. You just need like three of them in a row in Florida, and you just kind of, it's like you feel something very similar. And I think that's what's fascinating, is that this is like a human experience that we all go through at different levels. And, we some experience it at black, sometimes we experience it in the white, but there is a shade of gray that most of us experience and can relate.
Yeah, I think you're probably right for sure. I definitely know that it does kind of zap me sometimes. I definitely get hit by it especially when it's cold, but also when it's super hot. The summers I get a little. It's a different type of cabin fever, but you're inside all the time, and you're inside an air condition all the time, because in the summers it's super hot. So it's blazing hot. So you get a little cabin fever because you're just inside all the time, and you never want to go outside and be outside. So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying.
So as I'm working on my book, that is an interesting point that I have to make sure I remember, because I do it in conversation all the time, or when I go into a presentation, there's always somebody that raises their hand and say, hey, I experienced that opposite. Like, I don't like the summer, and when it's hot and humid, and I just don't like that. But when it's cold, I love it. And there is a segment of the population that actually experience reverse seasonal affective disorder. So the summer biologically hits them, and we're all biologically different. Some people have more layers of isolation. I won't call it fat, but they are built to be able to perhaps go through colder temperatures, and that's just their biological design. So they're affected more in the summer. And there is another reason for this that is extremely important, is that depending on where we live or geographic location, we experience the seasons differently. So for somebody in Arizona, in Phoenix, their winter, their quote unquote suffering or difficult season where you spend most of your time indoors is the summer. It's like inverse, because it's so hot, and it kind of mimics the life of somebody living in the winter, like how we spend more time indoors and so on. There's uniqueness to it. So there's like this caveat that I use the winter as an example, but if you find yourself on the opposite side, just change the word, right? Like the experience tends to be unique in its own way, but there's universality to it.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, you seem to know a lot about this. You've been spending a lot of time doing research on this, isn't that right? You're building a
Yeah,
whole book.
absolutely. I have over 10 years of just accumulating science, experience, philosophy. And kind of what I do is that I blend ancient wisdom when it comes down to the yin yang and Chinese traditional medicine and Ayurvedic principles. They have been talking about this for millennials. And then the current science, which is neuroscience. We talk about the brain, and we study the brain, and we know the production of hormones and neurochemicals, how they change based on your environment and your season. There's actual patterns when you produce more melatonin in the winter because it's darker, and when you produce more serotonin and cortisol in the summer because it's brighter. Like, there's actual patterns that mimic the yin yang. And we can go into chronobiology or circadian rhythms. We can go into ultradian rhythms, and how our parasympathetic and sympathetic system also has a seasonal rhythm to it. And then you can get into more of like the psychological part of it. Like, everything starts in the environment, and that is just widely accepted. And then from an environment, it goes into an emotional memory. And then that releases a neurochemical. And then that neurochemical is what makes us feel something. So that is pretty much just like Supernatural, the book from Joe Dispenza, and many psychological frameworks understand that. So I use a few of them to kind of go into what happens subconsciously when the environment changes, and then how we can get to have a choice. Because the last result we see is how we think and how we behave. But since we know that everything starts in the environment, who's asking, is that environment seasonal? Like, is there an actual pattern to that environment that if we study it, we can kind of use to understand and optimize our life? And that is kind of like my mission for the last 10 years.
When's that going to be finished?
I would say in a month. So I had written three books so far. One was just my first book, absolute garbage. My second one was extremely boring because I focus on my method. So I have methods and frameworks. I have basically I have a ecosystem. So you enter into a seasonal project where we are going to help you create a seasonal routine for this specific season. And then within that, we have the seasonal harmony framework, which is all that I just mentioned, like all that theoretical base from a very relatable perspective, so that we understand. Because when we know something and why it happens and what happens and how, now we actually are armed to be able to consciously choose. But then the next layer is how about yourself? Because we're all different and we all live in different places. So how can I teach somebody from a step-by-step framework, like is basically do this so that you can learn this. It's not like do this. It's more like do this so that you understand about your environment and your biology. So I call that the epigenetic seasonal program. Programming system. So it's just epigenetics. So epigenetics is the science that acknowledges that beyond our genes, like our genes are important, it makes us who we are. But above that, there is the environment. And this is explained by perhaps you have two twins that are identical, but one twin grows, they get split when they're born. One gets sent to the grown part of town, the other one gets sent to the richest family in town. One grows with support, the other one grows in violence and all sorts of bad stuff. One might end up in jail and, perhaps overweight or extremely skinny, and the other one might be the president of the United States and in perfect health and shape. And it's just because even though they have the same genes, they had a different environment. So that step is to help people understand by leveraging AI and tools that we have who they are, like what is your unique biology. Because I'm not here to tell you what to do. Let's find out what comes more natural to you. And then the last step is the optimization, the seasons framework. So what I have found out is that there's like this huge obsession with biohacking, and it's fine. I mean, I do it. I have my happy light on right now. I have my treadmill next to me. So I have my standing desk. I have all sorts of biohacks in my life. But the reality is that that is like the fine sand. And the beginning of a healthy human being, a person that feels good and is thriving, is the most important neurological behaviors, which are sleep, eating, activity, movement, exercise, social connection, outdoor connection, and novelty. When it comes down to the most basic neurochemicals in our brain, when it's like serotonin, cortisol, dopamine, oxytocin, and melatonin, those are the behaviors that create that harmony and that balance. And since the environment changes season after season, that harmony, that mix gets affected. So in that last step, we go through the specific season and guide the person to create their biologically and seasonally aligned routine so that they can have a good 3 months, and then they can just go through that same framework. And once they have gone through that, perhaps for somebody in LA, it might be twice a year because their seasons are not as dramatic, but there is a difference between the winter and the summer. So they can do it, twice a year. Once you figure it out, this is what I do in this season, this is what I do in this time of the year that works really good for me, it makes me feel good, it gets me in circadian alignment, then next year is going to be the same thing because it's cyclical, it repeats itself. But if we don't figure those things out, we're in this perpetual suffering, like, oh my gosh, I feel horrible this time of the year, I feel bad, and so on. So, I kind of got excited and started telling you about my framework, but it's because I was telling you my second book was just all about that, and it was boring as it gets. Like, it's just like, trying to build a documentary on a book and I'm not that skilled, so that didn't work. But I am getting close to finalize my third book, which is more relatable. Like, I'm extremely excited. Like, I know it's mind transforming, it will transform lives, and that should be live within the next 2 months.
Sounds awesome, man. Sounds like a lot of work. I know kind of the process of writing a book, so I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I just hired my second coach to guide me through that. My first coach is like a publisher consultant, and this coach is more of an execution coach. So I have so much content that all I need to know is just to how to format it in the best way. And lately, I've been doing quite a few presentations that have really guided me into what really gets the people going. I've been getting a lot of surveys and feedback, and I'm like, okay, I think I kind of get the order, the sequence that will hook the person and guide them to transformation without just getting bored and tossing the book out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds awesome.
Now,
Sounds
I want to ask you a question, and it's the process of documentaries, because my vision has always been that this seasonal movement, I call it a movement because it's more than just a book, it's more than a coaching program, it's just like human culture. Like, how can I impact positively human perception? And that's what God has given me, is this perception of the seasons and how we can use them to enter into a good rhythm. And I always had this vision about this, there's a documentary here. And I even have pictures in my head of how that looks like. But I know it's a lot of work, and I want to take advantage of, learning from the expert how that works.
so. What are you thinking? How you would make a documentary about kind of your progress and your work, or what are your thoughts?
So the documentary that has inspired me the most and is so relatable to this is The Minimalist. So I'm not sure if you have watched it yet.
I've seen. Is that a series or is there just one? I think it's
Uh,
one documentary that's like 2 hours.
yeah, so
I think
so
I've
The
seen that.
Minimalist is these two guys that started this. It's not like they started it, but somehow they put it on fire. The minimalist movement.
Yeah,
They influence the culture in a positive way. It's like, we don't need all this crap. Like, we have enough. So they take it to an extreme and they're minimalist. And they created this documentary of how they were releasing their book. And through that process, they documented basically their trip through the US to promote their book into small bookstores. But it really paint the picture. All that process give them the opportunity to dive into the philosophy and engage emotionally with the audience. And I kind of see that picture. I have like kind of like, I won't call it a scenes because I'm not that sophisticated, but like there's like this way of doing it that is kind of in my head.
yeah. That sounds more like a marketing campaign that they strategically developed, and they built out a documentary in the middle of it. Um, and I think for something like that, my there's one. It's one thing to execute on a documentary, and like right now I have an idea that I think is about pop culture, modern culture that America is wrestling with, and it's got a strong cultural kind of connection, so it immediately has a built-in audience. And then I'm shaping the content in a way that I think would help people wrestle with the topic and answer it. And then ultimately, I'm thinking about how I would build that content out through influencers or people that can kind of like pull some weight, and through kind of strategically filming different segments, and then ultimately through a distribution plan. A lot of my documentaries I've done, like the Empty American documentary, that was just me going out. I saw a moment during COVID where maybe I was the only one in the country willing to drive from coast to coast and film every major city empty. I think there were other people out there that filmed their own cities empty. New York, I think I saw one of New York. I think I saw one of Paris, maybe other cities as well. But I don't know of anyone that captured the entire United States in the way that I did. But that was just me grabbing onto a cultural moment and seeing kind of an opportunity and being prolific, and then capturing it and editing it and then posting it, and then running it through festivals. It was a very unscripted, unstructured kind of experience, where I just kind of went out and did it. So that's anyone could do that. You could start doing that yourself. You could start filming yourself right now. You could you could edit down your podcasts. You could just journal your experience. But if you want to impact culture in the fashion that these individuals did that you're talking about, the minimalist, you have to think about this, probably at a point of origin where you say, okay, we're writing this book, so let's start capturing this book, or let's start capturing this moment. And we're going to do this tour, and then we're going to do press releases and social media, and then we're going to hire a crew, and the crew's going to travel with us and film the experience. And then, maybe they probably had networks already built in where they were able to distribute through Netflix or other ways. Those campaigns, more often than not, are very strategic. They require a decent amount of funds and a marketing team that's kind of pushing out to execute. They're really well planned out, and I have a clear idea, and I've been part of kind of those campaigns. I've been a one person in it. I filmed a CEO who biked across the country, and I was the documentary filmmaker capturing his ride, and there were other members of the team that were doing press releases and helping him go to news outlets and connect with various outlets and tell that story. So, so those things are all like well-developed plans that kind of come into place and wrapped around kind of a strategic kind of story and narrative that they're trying to build. And you, like I said, so you could execute it on a smaller scale, but if you wanted to go on a bigger scale, you might think about timing and connecting with influencers and meeting those influencers at events, and then creating a big event where all the influencers come together and they're discussing the topic, and then kind of capturing that all on film, and then wrapping it up, packaging it, and distributing it through a major network. Those would be the pieces that I would know of, that I could talk to, and have had some experience with.
Wow, it's so exciting. Yeah, so like definitely, I don't know, it sounds like light years ahead, like 2 years in the future, at least. And I might be too innocent because it might even be longer than that, to achieve that level of execution. But I do see the potential, and like there is a story behind it, like the starting scene, the winter, and talking about how he affect us. And I agree, there is marketing elements behind it 100%. Another great example is Grounded. It's on Amazon Prime right now, and sure, there is an element of marketing, like the actual owner of the company that started the grounding, synthetic, I call, artificial grounding through mats, is the guy on the documentary, and obviously that's gonna drive sales. But I do see like the beauty behind it, that it impacts the culture, and since that is the mission of the influencer, we can call it like that for a better lack, then it's like it just goes hand in hand. And I think that to have a movement that impacts humanity, you have to have the book, you have to have the documentary, you have to have multiple ways to get to the people that need to hear it.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is you using a team, a network. Creating events where people can come, starting small, and working out from there. And those things take up a lot of energy and time. The people that do it the best, they work 14-hour, 16-hour days, 6, 7 days a week. They're waking up, they're writing, they're organizing an event, they're going to the event, they're instructing people to do things and execute on things, they're meeting influencers, they're creating new concepts, and then the next day they start it all over. I've been around these unique individuals that kind of rise to the top, and their work ethic is impeccable. Their work ethic is impeccable. It's something that can't be overlooked. A strong work ethic, and when I'm very critical of myself. I have achieved some things that I'm proud of, but I'm very critical of myself. And to be honest, for years I've kind of been frustrated that like anyone, you want to reach the top, you want to reach the pinnacle in your industry. Everyone does. And for years I've been frustrated, and lots of times I just was critical of myself. But then when I get around these individuals that kind of achieve those things, and I realize their commitment level and how much they sacrifice. They
Yeah.
sacrifice time with family. They sacrifice time with friends. They put off, so many of the luxuries just sleeping in. Kind of having a day where you're not focused and you're doing, your own hobby, something else. Like today, I spent like 2 hours in the morning off task, just completely off task. And I was saying to myself, if I was really serious about what I'm doing, I would not be off task right now. I would be on task. I would never let myself get off task. And those things, I'll say those things to me, and I'll get back on task. But I know when I've been around those people that are the term is monomaniacal. Your Steve Jobs, and the Steve Jobs of the world, that have one focus and want to achieve one thing, and that's the only thing in their purview. And they're just like, every day I'm doing this, and I'm doing it all day, and I don't care if I have kids, I don't care if I have a wife, I don't care if I have friends that I cut off. I'm getting to this spot, and I have come to the acceptance that's not really my way there. And maybe I'll make it, slow and steady, and maybe it won't be quite to the peak of Everest. Maybe it'll be a smaller peak that I'm just proud of for myself. But I think that's what you have to come to as a human. You have to come to the place where you're happy with your own achievements, and you've accepted yourself, and because lots of times when you do that, you end up finding happiness. You end up finding, because instead of chasing other people's dreams and chasing other people's lives, you're fulfilling your life, and you're treating yourself to the life that you want, and by nature you're going to end up being happier.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
think I think that's something to keep in mind in all of this.
I support that. And it's funny because what I feel that I'm trying to create, the movement, and just bring awareness to a higher level, is what you're describing for the people that don't have it. Because the Steve Jobs and those mono, I always want to say monomaniacs, right? Like mono, I can't remember the actual word, but the people that is just focusing on this one task, and are the people that we see on the news, right? Like that's the people that shows up. That's the people that we are exposed to, but it's a very small percentage of all of us. Is tiny, but those are the ones making the headlines, and is leading this culture into believing that that's the way to succeed, that is success itself, when in reality we're all different, and learning or unique rhythms is part of the equation to basically not just achieve, but visualize and realize, this is my definition of success. So I can talk for experience. I don't think I will arise to that level of success that those individuals that perform at that high level, because I'm not willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice some, and there is that's part of the journey, and that's fine. But I'm not gonna be leaving my family behind so I can achieve success. Like we're coming together, and that might create a little bit of a drag, and it might create a little bit of a timeline delay, or the quality might suffer. But it's fine because that's what I'm choosing success to be. I'm proud of the final result that might not be the sharpest image, but hey, look what I have next to me. And when it comes down to what you just mentioned, sleep, like, I prioritize it. I know it's part of my health and I enjoy it. And more than that, I know the science behind it, I know the benefits. So that's just one of them that I'm not leaving behind. And when it comes down to my actual framework, it's kind of the opposite of that extremely successful person, because I want people to be able to have a good quality of life, to age gracefully. And for that, you have to not just prioritize and only focusing on your sleep, your eating, your movement, and so on, but it's actually creating an ecosystem that supports the individual through all those activities. So, in an essence, we're completely inverse than the monomaniac, and I keep forgetting the word, but the person that is the most successful person in the planet. But at the same time, we're the best version of ourselves.
No, I'm 100% on board with you. That's kind of the deal. I mean, I think it's easy to want to chase the stars. They're stars for a reason. They shine, they stand out. And for whatever reason, your Elon Musks of the world, your you name it, the people that are kind of at the top of their game, it's you go, man, why am I not there? Why can I not have that experience? But I do think that there is a great deal of satisfaction in accepting yourself, accepting your life, and looking around at you, what you have, with appreciation and gratitude. And we don't all need to have golden bathrooms, you know? And in fact, we don't need that at all. We just, I enjoy one of my best times of day are sitting in that chair back there, which was not that expensive of a chair. Just sitting there in the morning in my small little office, which in my cheap little, that's like a Target bookshelf. It's nothing special. And reading in the morning and listening to some songs and just kind of taking a moment to kind of start my day, and sitting there for an hour with a cup of coffee.
Well, what a
And
biohack, right?
yeah, and it's pretty simple. And I'm not that doesn't require much. That's not that doesn't cost a ton, and it's a very sweet spot. You know what I mean? So I think part of life is just looking at what you do have and just recognizing and being thankful for what you do have. You know what I mean?
Are you sure you read the research on that share? Just kidding, because every biohack, there's research behind. And right now I'm into red light therapy because I'm gonna be purchasing a specific one in Black Friday. I'm just like getting ready for it. And the reality is that there's so much contradictory information about this new type of biohack that it's like it is endless. And things contradict each other. And anyways, we just waste so much time on that. But hey, I'm buying one because I think it's beneficial for me. But at the end of the day, what grandma says, right? Um, Again, I just go back to the sleep and what we've been teach, like what is kind of like common knowledge, sometimes get misappreciated. But when it comes down to appreciating what we have, I notice a lot of people that even the environment itself is not appreciated. Like, we put down the winter because, yeah, it kind of sucks, to be honest, sometimes. But hey, I appreciate it. And right now, like, it's not winter yet. We're getting there. We're like a month and a half from official winter. Hey, but I'm using it in my advantage. Like, it's my inspiration, right? It's like this ideal time of the year to write the book and do the things that it's a little less distraction, and everybody's experience is different and unique. but mostly seasons will show you an opportunity and a challenge. And usually the opportunity is just because you turn that challenge into an opportunity. So it's like appreciating and being aware of those changes.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And I think you're right about what grandma says. I mean, the biohacks and all the new diets and everything. At the end of the day, everyone kind of comes. Every 12 months, every 18 months, somebody comes out with a new one that reaches that catches everyone's eye. And the person that comes up with it, they really just came up with a good marketing idea, and they're making a
Hmm.
bunch of money, and everyone else is just distracting themselves with a new distraction, which is fine. You can distract yourself if you want. There's more important things in life than being distracted. If you slow down and stop being distracted, you're going to have to look at yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to have to look at your life. You're going to have to look at what you believe. You're going to have to look at your purpose, why you're here, and what you're doing. And what you're doing with the little bit of time that you have. And those things are very important things that you have to answer. Everyone has to answer. Sooner or later, they're going to come to a point where they answer them, even if it's on their deathbed. Hopefully, it's not on your deathbed, because you can do a lot for this world and make it a better place, and you can contribute a lot. So I think those things are important. But back to what you're saying about what your grandma says. The American family in the turn of the 1900s was the number one distraction. 80% of our time we spent with family, or that, don't quote me on that number, but it was one of our number one priorities. And then the list went down from family to friends to work, and then it went, video games came in there somewhere, and then inevitably, by the generation that we're in, our friends are our number one distraction, and then video games, and then work, and family's like number four. And the reason that that's a big deal is because the lineage of information that comes down, the wisdom that gets passed down,
Hmm.
our belief systems, what we believe in, and who we are as a culture comes from our family. And since we've fractured that, since we've allowed that to be fractured, I believe that our culture is far weaker, far less healthier, mentally less healthier, physically less healthier. We see a lot of violence. We see a lot of radical behavior. We see a lot of people that are detached. We see people that don't believe in God anymore. Science is the only God. Well, science is a useful tool. I would never throw out science. I think it's amazing, but I don't know why it has to compete with God, and I don't know why God has to compete with science. It's like, why do we have to be pitted against each other? Why does the red have to be pitted against the blue? Why do we always have to fight over every topic? Somebody benefits from that, not us. And the same with science and God. Why do we have to fight over it? Somebody's benefiting because somebody wants to win. Somebody wants to be more important. But the fact is they coexist. They can coexist, and they actually support each other. But I'm having a little bit of a rant. I'm just kind of ranting.
No,
But
I bet.
I think it goes back to family and grandma. You got to listen to grandma, man. That's the best place that's the best biohack. Grandma's got the best biohack.
Is that in your book though, where you're kind of going towards on this last statement? Is that what you're analyzing on your upcoming book?
Oh, my coming book, Empty America. That's interesting. It's so, I'm being much more vocal about my belief in God and my belief in family, and I'm becoming much more vocal about those things. I think they're very important. I think we've gone far enough away from them. I think it's time for us to go back towards them. I think culture it's like we're a rocket, and we've kind of reached the orbit, and we're coming back down, and there's some grounding pieces that we need. There's some
Yeah.
grounding pieces that we need. It's always good to go. It's always good to go out and explore, but it's also important to come back sometimes. You know what I mean? And so, but my new book is really about the journey, the American journey, who we are as a country. COVID, COVID has left a big question mark that no one has answered, and no one is healed from COVID. People are not healed. They're physically, they might be healed, although arguably maybe not, because the virus did some damage. Long COVID. I had long COVID. I had some crazy thing. And the vaccine has been proven to do some damage. And that's not me being an anti-vaxxer. It's out there. It's not out there. It's not as prevalent, but it's out there. And so, but mentally, I don't think we've healed from COVID. I don't think we've healed from what I would call a military grade propaganda campaign to scare the shit out of everyone for a solid 12 months. Humans were scared shitless for 12 months. Really. They were calling out death statistics like it was an NFL football game. Every day they had reports on how many people had died and how many people were sick. It was crazy. COVID was traumatic. It was traumatic propaganda. It was military grade propaganda, and it was intentional. And I'm not even trying to be conspiratorial, although I'm sure anything I say around this is. But if you think about the level of coverage by corporate media and the obsession for 12 months of your life, and then it kind of slowly trickled off for the next year or so afterwards. People are more conspiratorial than ever before. People are more paranoid than ever before. They're more afraid. The kids don't play in the street as much. They play on the computers more. People do not connect as much because they were traumatized by a level of fear that your neighbor was the threat. You couldn't go into a store without being 6 feet apart and wearing a mask because everyone was a threat. So I don't think everyone's healed from that. And I think, my father served in the Vietnam War. When he was 19, he was in Phu Bai, and he was in a Kwanzaa hut. A Kwanzaa hut was a metal hut that they had in Vietnam. And his base undercame some fire. So they had everyone started kind of shooting, and they were shooting in every direction. Well, when it undercame fire, he was in his bunk, and he had a choice to make. And his choice was to put his boots on and grab his M16 and run out and face the enemy, or to duck for cover, fight or flight. And my dad chose flight, and I love my dad dearly. And I tell this story cautiously because he was just a boy. He was just a boy. But that choice directed his life for the rest of his life. The most important moment, the biggest moment in your life, the life or death moment, you're going to go out and be a hero like you read in the comic books. You're going to be a hero that goes out and faces the enemy, and you're going to fight and protect your friends. Or you're going to be a coward and go under your bed and hide. And that impacted every decision for the rest of his life because that traumatic moment, that PTSD from that moment. And I've seen it. I've lived it. He's my father, and I love him. Americans across the nation are living that same PTSD from COVID. The way that they treated their fellow Americans, the way that they behaved, the way that they were afraid. And then they came out of it and they said, wait, was that what I thought it was? Is it as bad as everyone said? Wait, am I a complete coward? Why did I act that way? And they've never answered the question, which to heal from PTSD, you have to go back to the moment. And you have to recognize what happened, and you have to resolve it within yourself that was in the past and who I am today is different. I just had this. I have a therapist. I just went through this. I have a therapist, and I came to this traumatic moment in my life when I was in third grade, and I failed the third grade, and I uncovered Erickson's inferiority versus industry. In the third grade, inferiority versus industry. And I have lived with an inferiority complex my entire life. I felt that I was inferior to everyone because of my failures in the third grade. And I finally, literally 3 weeks ago, I finally came to a point where I'm like, oh my God, I've had an inferiority complex my entire life. I'm not inferior to everyone. I am competent. I'm a very competent adult. and I don't need to be treated in this way. And there was healing that happened, and change is happening, and I'm on a trajectory of growth. And that's what needs to happen to America post-COVID. And so I'm doing this book, and then I hope to do an Empty America tour. I hope to go to colleges. I hope to go to schools. I hope to go to corporate events and speak about this topic and speak about who we are as Americans. Who we are as Americans. We are a nation of immigrants. We are a melting pot, and we need to start to come back together under a banner, a united banner of an understanding of who we are, and that's kind of what it's about. And so that's I guess it's a little bit about Grandma, because my grandma was my hero. I loved her to death. And she was a true American, true and through, and she she was an immigrant from Eastern Europe. She was Polish. She loved polka music,
Oh
and
my, yeah.
you know, so
My mother-in-law plays polka music. She plays the accordion and she goes to polka festivals. She's from the the Czech Republic. So I know there is a difference, but they share quite a bit of culture, and I love their festivals.
Eastern
Yeah,
European. Yeah,
northern,
absolutely,
eastern, or
man. I would
eastern, just
love to go.
eastern.
I'd love to go. I've never been to Poland. I'd love to go. I'd love to go to a festival. I'd love to get in touch with my roots and my grandma.
My publisher consultant is from Poland, and he spends half of the year there, and he just came back from there. It's like a lot lower pace, family time, dinner time, table time. And I do want to say that I want to acknowledge that we don't need to go through a fire. I mean, a literal, you're on your bunk bed and there is fire, and you have to go through those places to have trauma. So PTSD is obviously, when you're talking black or white, it's on the black, but we all are into the gray. And I'm just going through the exact same thing. I just went through a book and went through, I don't know, 50 pages of discovery on my own to realize that I'm into a bunch of loops. So, we call them loops too, depending on who therapist you're working with. And I just recommend everybody to look back, because that's the only way you can pull that out and move into the future with choice. A lot of what we do is subconscious. So I touch on this a lot into my framework, which is that about 90% of our thought process is subconscious. We don't really even think about it. It's from our primal brain. And a lot of it comes down to fight or flight. So it's just survival mechanisms that drive our life until we become aware and we go through that painful process. So what you're describing about your book and what America has to do is just it's a personal experience that has to happen as a collective. And I believe that a book and a movement behind it can catalyze that. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because it's like we just want to bring awareness and perhaps a little bit of guidance into the equation. Because when it comes down to our families and our traditions and that lineage that is being broken because the society that we live in, when it comes down to the seasons, that's the exact same thing that I believe. I believe that the seasonal wisdom is ancient. And there's this little bit of woohoo to it, woo woo, like, oh, in reality, all it is just Eastern philosophy and even Western philosophy. When our ancestors moved into this land, they had to live in connection with the seasons or they will die. Survival was on the essence, and being one with your elements and your environment was just the only way to survive. So I seen and study this, and this kind of started about 150 years ago with the invention of the light bulb and technology picking up and separation between our environment, which we are not separate at all, but the illusion and being enclosed in an enclosed environment like our homes are now, that this trend started to happen. And I just want to bring back to it, like you're saying, like America is a melting pot that it's like ramen noodles. Like, that's what America is. It's a bunch of chicken, ramen, vegetables, and it's tasty and delicious. And somehow now it's just like, no, noodles go here, vegetables go here, and perhaps all you get is the water to it, and it doesn't taste as good, right? So I believe that that is a systematic issue that we're experiencing in every area of society, and it's because of specialization. This has been happening for over 150 years, and you have your purpose, and you're honoring that. So I am proud of you, and I'm proud of myself because I have my angle, and I'm honoring that, and it's our God-given purpose.
Yeah,
So
man.
when we talk about God and science, I also want to acknowledge that the separation is in our minds. Like, we create that separation, and you can always find a study that proves or disapproves or something. All you got to do is Google it the right way, and it's gonna pop. So we can hold on any evidence we want to disapprove our spiritual beliefs. And what I'm going through this process is that I am becoming more open to Eastern philosophy and Eastern spiritualism, and thinking about that differently. And it's a different way of looking at things. And again, within my book and the movement, it's just kind of like a blend where there is science behind it. And this is what wisdom has been telling us for millennials. And by the way, this is what you feel and experience. And it's all scientifically proved, but at the same time, it's holistic, and there is a philosophy basis, ancient wisdom through it. If I find something that contradicts each other, it cannot be right. But again, we make that evidence because we can just Google anything and show that, you know, something contradicts each other. But at the same time, if we Google it with different words, we can find that it all comes together, basically.
I'm with you, man. It is a great journey. It's definitely an amazing journey.
Now, I want to start wrapping things up here, because we're entering into the winter, and I just want to leave it open because, as you were mentioning earlier, we have to reflect, we have to look back, we have to look deep and search into our purpose. And like you say, you hope that it's not in our deathbed. That means that life was wasted. And the little bit of knowledge I have gathered when it comes down to seasonal living is that the winter tends to pull us in that direction. And lots of people see that as depression. Lots of people see that as not knowing how to handle that inward reflection. It takes courage to go there. It takes a little bit of learning how to do it. It's more of a science than an art. Sorry, it's more of an art than a science. And I just want to just bring a little bit of your 2 cents to it, as you have gone through this life and as you have looked inwards, and as we're approaching the winter, you know, how there is a good way and a bad way, because perhaps you've seen them both. But at the end of the day, it's the same energy that draws you to look inwards. And when you learn how to direct that energy, you end up in such a better place. And perhaps it's something that we do in a season of our lives, but more than our lives, in a season of the year. Because the most we do that in a rhythm, the better direction we continue to go towards. And usually, again, when we're in alignment, that's our purpose.
You know, I've spent a lot of my life looking inward, um, resolving the unresolved. It's kind of, you have to do it cautiously. It's an infinite space that you can get lost in. The idea of resolving everything within yourself, I've found that it can, that it is, if it's all you do, you will always find something to do. In the most recent history, I've discovered the value of looking upward. I say that cautiously. That's everyone's worried. Everyone, and we live in the craziest time, dude. You can't do
Don't
anything.
worry.
but you know what I'm talking about. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
say that respectfully. Upward to God, outward to people, and then inward. In that paradigm, upward to God first, giving credit to God, giving thanks to God, recognizing God. Here's the reason. Let's just assume. I I like what Jordan Peterson says. He acts as if God exists, and I think that's a fair statement. Meaning, I do not have tangible evidence of God. I can tell you of my life experiences and how things change. I do not have tangible evidence. I do not have scientific proof. But I know that when I'm focused on something greater than myself and something greater than humanity, and that I put my eyes on that, it seems to elevate my spirit, to aspire towards something that I can be that's better than all that is tangible on the earth. And then when I look outward to other people, I can tell you if you're depressed or you're struggling with anything or if you're in a bad spot in life, as soon as you start helping other people, as soon as you put your focus on other people, it will change your perspective, especially people that have less than you. But anytime you put your focus on serving other people, you will discover that your life is not that bad, that everyone has struggles. And then after you've done those two things, you can look inward and take a moment to reflect. And you can resolve things within yourself, and I think in a much healthier space. So I think you have to have that paradigm. You have to have that balance. You have to have those three. And I think if you can find those three, you'll be in a much better place, and you'll resolve things faster, and you'll move forward faster, and you'll find a much greater sense of purpose, meaning, and happiness in your life. And so that would be my reflection, because I spent years in my youth focused on me, and I can tell you that if that's your sole purpose, there's times when you need to, but if that's the paradigm that you're at the top, you're going to struggle to find your happiness.
wow. I say, to put my 2 cents to that triangulation, God, I'm gonna leave the middle for the last, but God, me, inside, inwards, and then outside, the environment. The environment is people, is again, the temperature, the weather, your home. There's so much to the environment, and I just love that we got to this point, because that is my perception on life, and what God has put in my heart to share, the importance of those three. God, going inwards and learning about yourself, learning, understanding at a deep level, not a superficial level, but understanding. You have this body that is unique, nobody else has it, and you also have many traits that you share with others. So what is that? But then when it comes down to the environment, that's why I pay attention to the seasons, because our environment is seasonal. And I think that's really what I've been able to use to understand my environment, is understand that the way I look at it today is going to be very different 6 months from now. But guess what? 12 months from now, going to be kind of similar. Like that orange tree I'm looking at right now will be orange 12 months from now. So there's like a cycle to it. And understanding how I feel inwards this time, not 6 months from now, but this time, and understand that sure, life will evolve. There's gonna be life seasons which are different than the yearly seasons, but what I feel this moment, I might feel similarly 12 months from now, because my biochemistry and the way that my internal rhythms reflect to the outer world, to the environment. And that's how God created us. That's how God has created me. And I love that we landed on this path. So, Barry, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Obviously, all your information is in the description down below. You guys, I encourage you to go check it out and get in touch with Barry if you have any ideas of any projects. But I say, go ahead and watch the documentary. Check out the YouTube channel. I spend hours looking at very cool and interesting documentaries. It's been my pleasure, and I'm very thankful of your time, very thankful of your wisdom. I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much for being here today.
Ruben, this is this has been a true honor. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for promoting my work and being so kind and giving me some time.
Well, I appreciate it, Barry. And you guys, as always, keep it seasonal.